Hi, my name is Bridget Lavin. I am the lead careers consultant for law students, and delighted to be invited to talk to you today. If we could move on to the next slide, that'd be fabulous. So I've been asked to talk to you about on a few different points. Please do ask any questions that you've got, and whether at the Q&A at the end or as we go through, we'll try and answer as many questions as possible. But in terms of giving you a bit of an overview as to how things are going, I'm interested to hear how you're finding it. But I was asked to talk to you a little bit about the legal jobs market, in particular, sort of in the COVID era. And actually, I hope that my news is fairly positive in that I guess last year when pandemic struck, strike is a slightly dramatic phrase, I think we saw a number of vacation schemes, so for the solicitor pathway, mini pupilages, so the formal summer work experiences, they were being cancelled in the midst of the first lockdown. But actually beyond that, from my perspective, certainly, everything has pretty much seamlessly moved online in terms of the recruitment process. Of course, I mean, in terms of law firms and chambers, quite often they are, well, the larger organisations are recruiting up to 2 years in advance for law firms and sort of 18 months advance. For barristers, you're only applying for your pupillage for the training, the graduate training programme for barristers in your final year of study. But essentially that seems pretty seamlessly to have shifted online, and certainly throughout the summer I was working with any number of law speakers and graduate recruiters, and we were running webinars online, and actually that process I think has worked very effectively, and things like insight events, work experience internships, those have all been ongoing. Assessment centres in terms of the graduate recruitment process, it's all been going online. And seems to be working very effectively. But of course, with lockdown starting to ease now, or the restrictions starting to ease, I think people are an awful lot more positive about, sort of moving forward. The interesting thing to see will be, and maybe Joe will be able to talk about this later, but actually in terms of the future, or in terms of legal practice, I think actually speaking to a number of law firms in London, they're quite keen to get their trainees back in the office and actually have that kind of practical training in and around the other lawyers. But of course, I mean, training contracts, I've spoken to any number of trainees and run events with them this last year, where we've been talking from the comfort of our homes, my office kitchen, as I currently stand and speak to you, and that's worked quite well. And so I think there may well be a shift to that blend of working remotely and working in the office. So it's going to be really interesting to see if organisations moving forward can't take the best of what we've learned in the way that we work in this last year or so. Things that I suppose, in terms of if there are those of you who've been trying to get work experience, legal work experience, I think that might have been, well, I know that there are a number of students who've struggled to get legal work experience, sort of just ad hoc, where you might kind of send your CV and a covering letter to a local law firm. I think that certainly has been impacted in the course of pandemic, because it's very difficult when people are working remotely to be able to give you tasks, to give you insights, albeit in and around the confidentiality of the legal process. So I think that certainly might have been something that you as students coming into university might have come across. But again, there's an awful lot going online. I've got another slide at the end with some resources. If you haven't already heard about it, ways to get you started, in and around the summer holiday. I'll always send you away with things to do. So that's one thing. So as a careers consultant, I work with students throughout their journey at Brunel and beyond. I work with students for up to 3 years after they've graduated. But you'll certainly see a lot of me and Rome when we get to work together on the first year legal skills and systems module. So we'll look forward to seeing you next, in the autumn. I thought something that I've been really kind of banging a drum on this last year is commercial awareness. So things to be aware of, what's going on in the world. So again, this is of a COVID theme. When it's difficult to find work experience, I always kind of think, well, what can you do? And there are all sorts of virtual internships online, and that's something on the slide later I'll talk about. But actually, in terms of developing your commercial awareness, now commercial awareness actually relates to any kind of industry sector that you're looking at. Now, if you're thinking about commercial law firms, for example, or commercial chambers, if you want to be a barrister, then obviously that's kind of looking more at the business. Think about the kind of work that those organizations are going to be doing. But equally, commercial awareness relates to if you're thinking you're interested in sort of human rights, working with individual clients. It's just understanding the clients, the business, the work you're doing, and actually kind of getting informed. And so I've been talking to students in this last year about thinking, look, what can you do from home? And that's read up on sort of hot topics, because organizations, when you speak to them, they just want to know that you're in. There's a start point. They want to know that you're interested in things. So when you're coming into your first year and you first take those steps of actually speaking to legal recruiters, legal employers, the opportunities sound interesting. But if you've been following topics that interest you, in the news, and you can talk kind of articulately about, what's going on, some of the different issues, not expecting to be an expert, but that's really, really important. So some of the topics that have been coming up recently. So I'll try and stick with the COVID theme. So I don't know if you've been reading, but there've been concerns. I think it's basically one of the UK's largest care homes, I think a month or so ago, introduced a no jab, no job policy. So that basically there've been concerns over the low take up of vaccines amongst staff in care homes who are dealing with some of those most vulnerable to COVID-19. And so they're saying, actually, you need to have a jab, your COVID jab, if you want to come and work with us. And there are some real kind of questions. Again, it's a bit like the topic of vaccine passports, queries in relation. Is that discriminatory? Can you do this? So you can see in the news, there's concern coming from the unions, but the government is actually looking at this. It's considering whether or not to make this a legal requirement. So there's loads going on out there. Another thing, you'll hear words like fintech and artificial intelligence, and blockchain technology. If you're interested in the corporate world, there are some of the, there's lots going on, and find the thing. I always say, don't expect you know everything, but actually think to take a broad brush to start with. Find the things that interest you, and then really kind of say, right, build up your knowledge over a period of time. That's really going to help you when you first get the chance to speak to those recruiters, when you're kind of maybe applying for first year insight events or coming to networking events. Really good way to get started. Another thing I wanted to talk to you about was, I'm not going to go into the detail on this, but you might have heard you do a law degree to qualify as a solicitor, a law degree, then you do your legal practice course, then you do your training contract to get qualified. That's sort of a very linear route. The reality is, can be lots of different pathways in. But as of September this year, you're going to be focused on the solicitor's qualifying exam. Okay, so it's a new route to qualification for solicitors. So don't worry if you're hearing new language coming in. You're going to hear lots from us, lots of opportunities. We've teamed up with Barbary, or the law school's teamed up with Barbary, who are one of the providers. They're going to come and do some talks for us, so there's plenty for you to make sure that you're well informed. But just kind of I guess what I'm trying to do here is drip feed a few different ideas in, because it's so important that you actually actively get interested and get engaged, and that's what legal recruiters ultimately will look for. Okay, now strategies for success. Basically, I was going to say I'm talking quite a lot. The next slide will not take quite as long. That I promise you that. But strategies for success for me is, I always think, have a plan. Okay. Now, some students come to university and they know exactly what it is that they want to do, and they come in and they say, right, okay, what kind of opportunities, what can I do to start to get the key skills and the qualities and experiences that will help me achieve my objective? And I was speaking, there was a couple of students actually did a webinar for me last summer, and they both in their second year of studies, at the earliest possible time that you can secure a training contract for one of the bigger law firms. They both secured their training contracts in their second year. Now, both of those students came into me within their first week of university and said, Bridget, this is the plan of action. This is what I need to do. How can you support me in achieving that? Fabulous. Okay. So have a plan. If you know what that plan is, then you've got you can take those steps. If you don't have a plan, don't worry. There's your time at university is really about exploring. Again, it's that interest, it's that curiosity, that I'd encourage you to sort of engage with. And there's loads going on at university to help you start to develop your own. Okay, right, what is it I want to do? What are those next steps? So don't worry if you're that person. Your plan might be, I don't know what I'm going to do, so I'm going to embrace as much as I can. So can we move on to the next slide now? And I will just thought it might be helpful just to give you an idea as to some of the things, the kind of what people do when they leave Brunel. Say, oh, crikey, O'Reilly, you're only just about to come to Brunel. I'm not starting to talk about what happens next, but just to give you a bit of an idea. So quite often when students move on from Brunel, they might go straight into their postgraduate education. So currently you do your qualifying law degree, then you do your legal practice course, then you move on. You have to do the postgraduate study. So LPC currently moving into the solicitor's qualifying exam. If you want to become a barrister, it's the BPC. Some students will go off and do a master's, so another version of postgraduate study, but not on the professional angle. And others will actually work in a range of different roles, maybe whilst kind of studying their LPC part-time, maybe just to get some practical experience, maybe not to pursue a career in law at all. So lots of different pathways, and again, different types of roles. So we've got Magic Circle, the top city law firms, Irwin Mitchell kind of working for kind of big ticket corporate work, as well as actually working for individuals, working for the civil service, the government legal service, whole range of different pathways, as well as the barristers there, in terms of Trinity Chambers, so regional set, and 187 Fleet Street is very much sort of more criminal in central London. Just going on to my last slide, I think I've got one more minute to chat to you. What can you do when you come to Brunel? Well, again, there's so much that law school puts on. So for Roman and myself, we love to work with students who've got involved, get it actively involved rather than just relying upon your studies. I always say to students that education is really, really important. We want you to do well. Consistently strong academics, really, really important. But actually, employers look for more. And getting involved with the activities is almost on campus available to you. It's a kind of a really important start point. Law Lives, there's a legal clinic. You can get involved with fraud examination. So there are loads of law-related activities you can get involved with to develop your interests, develop your skills. The Law Society, you can do mooting. So if you're thinking about the barrister route, I think mooting and debating, really, really important. Again, there are employers that come in there. I, myself and Roman organise the Law Week, which happens in January, at the end of January. Lots of activities, opportunities to meet legal professionals on campus, whether it's real-time or virtual. But there's also the Ready programme, the Brunel Plus Award. Get involved with volunteering, develop those skills working with clients, so important. Roman's going to talk about placement, so I'm going to hand back in a second. What I've just thrown there at the bottom are some resources, so law-related resources to get you started. Chambers students at the top of the list there. There are loads of different resources you can use, but Chambers student is a really good way to actually. There's a brilliant button that says "Getting Started." Fantastic. And it's going to talk you through the solicitor pathway. It'll talk you through the barrister pathway. There are links to commercial awareness that I talked about earlier, but there's just so much information, and I would absolutely encourage you to have a look there. But you can also look at virtual internships through the Bright Network and also the Forage. So much out there. Give yourselves a head start thinking about that plan, and as soon as you get to campus, I'm going to look forward to seeing you. But I'm going to hand back now to Kashim and say thank you, because I probably overran. Sorry.
Thank you very much for that, Bridget. That was very, very, very insightful and very interesting. Just for the students that might have joined in after we had started, please do get your questions in using the Q&A box down below. But without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Roman from the placements team.
Thank you very much, Kashim. Hi, everyone. As introduced, my name's Roman. I'm the placement and internship advisor focusing on the law school. So I work closely with Bridget, as she mentioned, but my role is specifically for students that are looking to do that placement year as part of their accredited course that would happen after their second year. Can I jump on to the next slide? So reasons why students should do a placement. So law school, the three courses within the law school that offer you the placement is obviously the straight law course. We've got law with criminal justice and law with international arbitration. So we'll offer placement years within those three courses. And why students choose to do a placement is mainly just because everyone has the idea of law. You've either seen it, heard from family members, or people that's working in the industry, or seen it on TV and stuff like that. But the main reason students get involved in doing a placement is to gain that experience, to really truly understand what it is to become part of the industry and work within the industry. So it's a great way to do that. It also helps you improve your skills and grades. What we mean skills and grades, your placement year is an accredited part of your course. So it does help students increase their final results. It's worth in weight is this equivalent to another module. So it's about 8% overall on your degree that you can increase by completing a placement year, passing a placement year. So it really helps students that are probably on that 2-1 and need a couple of extra percentages to get into that first criteria, as well as students sitting on a 2-2 pushes them up to a 2-1. And historically at Brunel University, we've seen students that complete a placement year typically end up with a 2-1 at least, or a first overall. So it's a great way to get that result that you're all dreaming of. Skills-wise, everyone comes into university and everyone in life has a plethora of skills that's going to be applicable for different roles. Doing a placement year allows you to fine-tune your legal skills, so you come out of your placement year really understanding what's important to progress within the industry and learning essential skills focused on your industry. It gives you a great insight into the sector, so it allows you to see firsthand as to what a life of a solicitor would be like, starting from the very bottom, paralegal work. Our placement year roles, students are thrown into the deep end. It is what we'll call a junior paralegal role, so you do get really hands-on to really understand the industry and get a really good insight into the industry. A lot of our students that have completed our placement years, they do get offered in terms of their graduate role. So some students have been offered their training contract opportunities based on their performances with their placement years. Other students have been offered a graduate role. It might not be the training contract, but as Bridget mentioned, other routes, some students have been offered those paralegal roles and stuff like that once they've graduated. So it's a great way to get that step up and to take a bit of that ease off in your final years, knowing that you've got a job to go to after you've graduated as well. So a lot of students do prefer to go into the placement year just to get that option after university. And finally, and probably the most important one, especially for the legal industry, is networking. Networking is a word that you would hear Bridget and I say a lot throughout your time at university, especially for the legal industry. Networking is really important. We do encourage you to do a lot of networking, which is why we put a lot of events on throughout the year and bring on as many employees as we can into campus, so you can get a chance to kind of meet with them and network with them. But obviously working within industry gives you that easy option to start networking with people that are part of the industry. You get to network with people from the firms that you're working for. A lot of our students get the option to go down to court and stuff like that. So you get the opportunity to start meeting people outside of your current companies and barristers and stuff like that. So it's a great opportunity to help network and really develop that CV that you need once you've graduated. Can I jump onto the next slide? So the main advantage of doing a placement year, aside from what I've obviously mentioned around getting your career kick-started, a lot of students that graduate, students that have done a placement year earn a lot more than students that have without the placement year. Doing your placement year, you're going into industry with 1 year's industry experience, not general experience and not experience outside of your industry. If you've done a placement year in law, you're graduating with 1 year's law experience. So when you're going into your graduate market, you're able to negotiate a higher salary. A lot of times when you see salaries advertised, they'll have a range. So for example, 80 to 24K a year. Those students that have done their placement year are able to negotiate a higher salary, that 24K a year, because you're going in not with just your 2-1 or a first that you've achieved, but also 1 year experience, forcing that employer to pay you more. The recruitment process also mirrors what you would expect to see once you're applying for graduate opportunities. So it's a great way to help learn that experience, because it is very, very challenging. Going into graduate roles and placement year recruitment process is very different from your standard retail and hospitality roles. The interview processes can sometimes have 4 to 5 stages, and utilizing all the technology we have. So you have video interviews, you'll have psychometric testing, and then you'll have assessment centers and stuff like that. And that's all part of the placement experience. So doing that in your placement year allows you to really understand what's required of you once you graduate. So it helps you kind of combat those fears that you might have about your graduate applications. And the main thing is research, the daily reports, all the studies that the university does shows that students that have done their placement years are in either further study or work within a year after they're graduating, whereas those students that haven't done that placement year, it can take a bit longer. So that's why a lot of students do want to do that placement year. And since I've been working with the law school, this is going to be my 4th year working with the law school. And every year there's been an increase of students that want to do a placement year. So we are seeing more students that want to do a placement year, which means it's definitely getting a lot more competitive. And we always encourage students to kind of get involved with a placement year. If not a placement year, you want to get involved with work experience in general. Can I just go to the final slide? So this is just the kind of range of employers that we work with. It's not the only ones we work with, this is just some that we picked out with. So on the left-hand side, you've got all of our commercial companies such as Microsoft, L'Oreal, who are big name brands which everyone knows and loves, who offer placement opportunities within their legal departments. We also work very closely with local councils. So we work with Hammersmith Council, Ealing Councils, and Westminster Councils who offer placement opportunities in different departments. So it's not just one focus. It's not just going to be commercial. You have the opportunity to work in different areas of law. We also work with the Home Office, a close relationship with the Home Office for anyone that's looking into gaining a bit more experience within that whole immigration law and family law as well. Aside from the commercial organisations, we work with independent law firms, some that you know of, such as Latham & Watkins, some that you probably never heard of, like Hines Solicitors and OGR Stock Denton. So these are firms that would offer you the opportunity to work with fee earners, so directly working with solicitors to gain a good insight. A lot of our students that work on those placement years, like I said, they will be taking on paralegal roles, so doing legal research and working with employers with their bundles and skeletons, so really understanding what's required of you to progress in your future. The main thing, all of these employers that we work with, the main thing that they always mention over and over again when they're doing their recruitment, so if you wanted to get a step up, and a lot of students ask me, how can I be different from all the other students? And it's something that Bridget mentioned, is to be active. A lot of our employers want you to be active within the industry. Bridget and I and the law school put on various activities through the year where we have employers coming in. There's all of these webinars and stuff like that you can get involved in. All of these things show employers that you're active in the industry and passionate about the industry. So when you're applying for your placement or even your graduate roles, by doing things that show that you're active within the industry, is going to show that you're going to stand out once you're going down through that recruitment pathway. So just be legally active, take advantage of the law school, take advantage of the Law Society, make sure you join the Law Society, because that will give you free access to everything that the university is putting on. If there's any questions, definitely put them in the chat box, so I'll be here towards the end of it.
Thank you very much for that, Roman. That was really insightful. I just want to echo what Roman said about joining society. When I was a student, I joined so many societies and I absolutely loved it. So make sure you join, if you're going to be a law student, the Law Society and a lot of other societies that are going to be kind of on show when you go around the Freshers' Fair. We're going to pass it over to a law student now, Rebecca. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Rebecca.
Thank you, Cashin, for that. So as you said, I am Rebecca, and I am currently a final year student studying law. So for my A-levels, before I chose to come to Brunel, I studied history, politics and English. I was attracted to Brunel because it's one of the only London unis that have accommodation inside the campus. So for this reason, I thought that Brunel would have a really good social sort of aspect to the university, as well as obviously for study purposes. So I thought that was really important because I didn't know anyone else who was coming to Brunel. So I thought the fact that it was the only one in London that has on campus accommodation would be very good for socialising, and I'd be able to make many friends, which I can confirm definitely helped. And I am about to leave university with a good set of friends, so if that's something you might be worried about before coming to uni, I would definitely recommend that, I would say that coming to Brunel, you'll definitely make loads of friends. There's loads of social events on all the time, so that's definitely something you don't need to worry about coming here. So for me, I had always known that I wanted to do law. There wasn't something that sort of sparked my interest. I know a lot of people will say, oh, well, I watched Suits and that's why I wanted to get into law. which is perfectly fine. But for me, I just generally always had an interest in it. And I know a lot of people, when they're picking their A-level subjects, they think, oh, if I want to do law at university, I've got to choose law as one of my A-levels. But I can confirm that this does not make a difference. When you start in your first year, everyone's taught off of the same level. Everyone's taught as if it's their first time they're ever learning about law. So if that's a concern you have, I honestly wouldn't worry about it, because I didn't study law at college, even though I knew that it's what I wanted to do at university. So I would not worry about that at all. Another reason that Brunel is very good for law is all of the facilities that it has. We've got law students have their own section in our library. Unfortunately now, obviously, we're in a pandemic, so it's not quite the same. But during normal times, the library's open 24 hours during term time, which comes in very useful when you've got essays to write, especially during exam period. So I couldn't recommend Brunel's library enough. Brunel also has its own moot court, so that's something definitely you should be looking into using. Yeah, and then in addition to the endless amount of facilities that Brunel has, it's also one of the very few universities that offers placement years alongside the law course. And this is such a great opportunity. It means not only do you graduate with your law degree, you also graduate with experience, which obviously a lot of employers are now looking for. So I chose to do a placement year. I was fortunate enough to be able to do mine with the Home Office, and I cannot recommend doing a placement year enough. I definitely feel that a year working has definitely helped me be able to do better in my final year. It sort of puts you in that routine of getting up every day, doing work all the time, having constant deadlines, because as I'm sure you'll be aware, in your final year it'll be much harder with your dissertation as well, so it helps give you those sort of time management and organisation skills. So as it's been said, that's why doing a placement year, I can definitely see why a lot of students end up graduating with a 2-1 or a first class qualification. So I honestly couldn't recommend doing a placement year enough. If that was my one piece of advice that I would have to give to anyone, is take full advantage of the placement year. If I had any other sort of advice to give, it would be that throughout the years, Bridget is wonderful, and she will always be sending out different invitations to different events. She'll make you aware of different open days, insight days at law firms. And if I could give you one piece of advice, it would be attend as many as you can, because when it comes to your second year and final year, and you're looking at what the next step might be, sort of applying for training contracts or the SQE, doing those little events here and there definitely helps, gives you that sort of advantage for when applying. I would also say, I think for me, the most challenging thing that I found studying law was sort of the transition from studying in college to studying first year in university. It's the first time you're sort of dealing with loads of different case law and different legislation and articles of each provision and so forth and so forth. So if I had any advice about that, I'd say the library is really good for it's really good for the different type of books they've got so many resources, and unfortunately I didn't take full advantage of those resources until maybe later on in my second year or third year. So coming into my first year, I wish I knew to use the library to my full advantage. There's so many resources, and not only are there resources, there's people, teams that will have the Ask team, especially, which I'm sure you'll be aware of once you come. They will help with things if you've got questions about grammar, or you just have a general overall question about your writing style when it comes to assignments. I would definitely say take full advantage of those. So yeah, I think that covers everything. Back to you, Kasham.
Very much for that, Rebecca. That was very, very beneficial. And we're going to go over to Joe now.
Hello everyone, my name is Joe Taylor and I'm an alumni of the Brunel Law School. I'm currently a trainee solicitor at Taylor Vinters. I am on holiday by the time that this speech takes place, and as the eagle-eyed amongst you may have noticed, I pre-recorded this video prior to going away. I'm hoping to dial into the session for the Q&A part at the end, but that will be subject to the signal in the North Yorkshire Dales. Today I'm going to speak about my experiences since leaving Brunel, and then I'm going to talk about how COVID has changed things, and hopefully answer any questions that you may have later on in the session. So, as I mentioned, I studied law at Brunel. I did the 4-year professional placement course. So my third year was out in industry for a year before graduating in 2016. Upon graduating, I got a job at a probate administration company that was local to me in Hertfordshire. There I applied for grants of probate and grants of administration of estates, and I gradually progressed to become a qualified will writer. Following that, I secured my training contract. Now, for those of you who don't know, a training contract is a 2-year period of recognised training that you have to undertake if you wish to qualify as a solicitor. The rules have changed by the regulator, and that's not always the case now, but for me, because of when I did my degree, that's the route that I had to take. I have nearly finished that training contract and will qualify as a solicitor in September. I'm undertaking the training contract at a firm called Taylor Vinters. We're an international firm with offices in London, Cambridge, Oxford, Singapore and New York, and I'll come on to talk about them a bit more in a little moment's time. So once I secured my training contract, as is so often the way, there was the 2-year wait period before starting that. During that time, I travelled the world. I started my journey in the Middle East, journeyed through the Middle East, through Asia and down to Australia and New Zealand, before coming back in September 2018 to start the LPC. The LPC is a 1-year postgraduate course that, again, you have to do to qualify as a solicitor. Again, the rules have changed now, but that was the route that I had to take. I completed that course and then started at Taylor Vinters. Now, what's really important here is I don't think I would have got my job as a trainee solicitor at Taylor Vinters had I not worked at the probate administration company that I was talking about earlier. Equally, I don't think I would have got my job at the probate administration company had it not been for my professional placement as part of my degree. So it's a real honour for me to be able to talk to you about my experiences and to share those with you today, as I really believe that I wouldn't be in the position that I am were it not for my degree and the experiences that I had thanks to Brunel. So whilst I've been undertaking my training contract, as is common but not necessarily always the case, you have to try at least 3 different departments. I have experienced employment law, corporate law, and I'm currently in commercial technology. And as I mentioned, when I qualify in September, I'm hoping to qualify into the employment team. So that's enough about me. And now what I'd like to do is talk about how the impact of the coronavirus pandemic has changed things for me. Now, it's affected a lot of people in a lot of very different ways. The stories that I'm about to talk about are personal to me, and fortunately for me, they have mostly been quite positive. So there's 4 things that I'd like to speak about, and that is the logistical impact, the practical impact, how we've supported our clients, and how my working day has changed in the last 13 to 14 months since I've been working from home. So I'm now in quite an unusual position where I've done more of my training contract remotely than I have from actually being in the office, having only spent 6 months in the office and have done the last 12 to 14 months working from home. I have only been to the office once since March last year, and that was to attend to a very urgent matter to do with an upcoming trial. So it's circumstances have meant that I have been working from home for quite a long time. Logistically, what that means is I'm obviously no longer having to do my commute. Prior to lockdown, I was commuting from my home in Hertfordshire to the firm's North Cambridge office. That was a 120-mile journey, and I spent 3 hours a day in the car. Obviously now I don't have to do that, and as a result I've saved quite a lot of time and quite a lot of money. The bonus of doing that, of course, is that I've had more time to work, and I've also had more time to do things for myself. In the last 12 months I've taken up running, and I've actually got quite good at it, but I don't think I would have been able to do that had I been doing that journey and then having to go out for a run in the evening at 8-9 o'clock at night at the earliest. Wouldn't appeal to me. So that has been one positive of the lockdown, in that I've been able to get out there, get fit, and find a new interest and a new hobby. One of the downsides from working from home, of course, is that I don't get to see my colleagues in person. Whilst we have Zoom calls, video calls several times a day, there really isn't a substitute for being in the office surrounded by your peers and your workmates, and especially from a learning point of view, that is something that we have had to adapt to, and I'll come on to talk about that shortly. So whilst obviously the benefit of the logistical impact of the coronavirus has been that I can work from home and not spend all that time alone in the car, there is of course a negative impact for that, and that is that sometimes it does get a little bit lonely. However, you do get used to these things, and it's all about adapting, and I'm very lucky to work for a firm where if you feel that way you can speak to people and they will support you. Secondly, now I'd like to talk about practicality, and that has been in terms of, well, what is the impact from working from home? Prior to the lockdown, it'd be very unusual for me to work from home, whereas now obviously I've been doing that for quite a long time. I'm fortunate to work for a firm that responded very quickly and very agile to the lockdown. We had laptops and second screens sent out very, very quickly. We updated our software. We had ergonomic chairs and stands sent out so that we can work effectively, efficiently and comfortably from home, or indeed wherever we may choose to do so, obviously lockdown rules permitting. And that's a real big theme that has emerged for me throughout the whole lockdown. Not only has it been about responding quickly and positively to the challenges that it has presented, it's also been about continuing to assess those responses and assess the challenges. Taylor Vinters, for example, have continued to engage with employees, not only asking us for what we would like and what we need to work effectively and comfortably from home, but also continuing to do so on a rolling basis. If a need for something else crops up at a later date, we can put forward a suggestion or ask for that. And 9 times out of 10, those suggestions have been granted and the needs have been met. A specific example of that is the internal communication software that we were using. Whilst it was good to get us going, it became apparent that it wasn't necessarily up to standard. As such, we quickly switched software and now use a much more conventional and developed platform which has improved everyone's working day. Now, the reason for that is, and as I've mentioned already, it's important to continue to assess, continue to adjust, and to continue to work proactively and positively. That's obviously in the context of a commercial environment, but I don't think that's to say that that shouldn't be in the case of a higher education or a studying environment. My advice would be that it's really important that you identify what these challenges are, be it when you're doing your A-levels or studying for your degree, or indeed when you're working from home. Identify what those challenges are, think about what the solutions to those challenges could be, and then put that to the people that can sort them out for you. I really think in times such as this, and indeed as lockdowns start to lift, that there's no substitute for engaging with people, for talking to them and discussing, the pros and indeed the cons of everyone's working day. Now, obviously, as I've mentioned, I wouldn't be working from home were it not for the pandemic and the lockdown. However, I really don't think that will change anytime soon. And also, when it does start to change, I'm expecting there to be a very fragile, agile and flexible way of working. So I'll be very surprised if I have to go back to 5 days in the office again. So that's another way of how COVID has changed things. There's that continued adaptability, and with that adaptability comes a degree of flexibility, which we wouldn't have necessarily seen beforehand. I'd now like to speak about the clients of the firm. So Taylor Vinters is renowned for helping innovators and entrepreneurs. Specifically, we have a strong client base in the life sciences industry, and given the effects of the pandemic, not only on the healthcare industry, but in a broader sense that I'll come on to talk about, we have, of course, been very, very busy. Some of the more obvious things that you'd expect us to be doing is the intellectual property protections and the brand enforcement for vaccines, for ventilators, for rapid testing kits. Our corporate team, however, and our emerging companies team have been equally very, very busy assisting with the sale and acquisition of various different pharma companies. Further, our employment team has also been kept extremely busy due to the continuous changes to the furlough scheme, what that means for an employer and also what that means for employees. We represent both, so our phones have been ringing and we've been providing guidance on those points. An area that wouldn't necessarily spring to mind immediately that has needed support as well, and that's been provided by our real estate team, is that in the landlord development area. With rapid testing centres springing up all over the country, there will be leasehold, freehold implications that needed to be sorted out, and we're proud to have represented several different companies and worked with the NHS to assist with establishing those. Finally, the personal impact that working from home and the lockdown in general has had on individuals has also seen that our private wealth, our entrepreneurial wealth and our divorce teams have also been kept quite busy as well. Finally, what I'd like to talk about before I conclude is how my working day has changed. Aside from the fact that I obviously don't have such a long commute and that I sit here most of the time on my own, physically at least anyway, what's really important for a trainee is supervision. I'm ultimately here to learn how to be a lawyer, and in September I will be a lawyer, so I've needed to adapt to that and adapt to those training methods. I'm fortunate that the firm has struck a really right balance. I haven't felt like I've been left out on a limb, and I haven't equally felt like I've been under someone's thumb. I've felt trusted and supported, but equally it's really important that had I not felt like that, I should have made my voice heard and told those people that needed to hear it, so that I can train and become the lawyer that I need to be. Working remotely has provided challenges for that, but again, because of this dialogue, because of how the firm has responded, and also because of the needs that I've identified myself, I've been able to overcome that. And now feel quite confident about qualification in September. Once again, this flexibility, continuing to adapt and also continuing to review and responding positively is how my working day has changed. So to conclude, those are the key themes of how COVID has changed things. I think it's really important that we keep those in mind even as things start to lift. Now, obviously I'm talking about this in a professional, commercial environment, but again, I think it will be applicable to all people at all stages of their career and their studies. So if you take one thing away from this talk, it's that I hope you understand and you realise that despite the challenges that we have faced, because of how we've responded to those challenges, by being agile, by engaging with others, by identifying challenges and providing solutions, and then continuing to review those solutions, we've overcome those challenges in a positive and proactive way. Hopefully, signal permitting, I'll shortly be dialing into the Q&A session. If not, and you have any questions, you'll find me on LinkedIn, so please don't hesitate to send me a message on there. Many thanks.
I do get a lot of employers will get in touch with us at Brunel in terms of different opportunities. Actually, I had a couple of students recently interviewing with, I think it was HSBC in terms of a compliance role. So that came up specifically for postgraduate students. But actually, a lot of the opportunities that I send out, there's another postgraduate master's student who's got going through the assessment process for a UK law firm. So it depends on what your interests are. Sometimes I'll work with postgrad students who maybe done their undergrad overseas, looking to come and get their postgrad study, whether you're looking to go back to your home country or whether you're looking to work in the UK, might be looking to do some paralegal work. What you can do depends very much on the kind of experiences that you've got. There's another postgrad student currently I'm working with who, in his home jurisdiction, there's not an emphasis on getting practical legal work experience, whereas in the UK, we're always encouraging you to get as much experience, whether it's through the placement that Joe and Roman have spoken of, and Rebecca as well, forgive me, or actually kind of just looking at sort of ad hoc insight experiences and kind of applying to work experience in local firms. So actually, it's quite bespoke as to what it is that you want to do, but certainly the kind of thing that I do work with students. The student I was just chatting about, he didn't have any practical work experience from a legal perspective, so we were drawing on his interest from the course, as well as actually the transferable skills of commercial experiences he'd gained back home. And the last I spoke to him a couple of weeks ago to do a mock interview because he's got interviews lined up. So there are opportunities, but it's not like placement in terms of masters. Currently, the law postgraduate masters program it doesn't have a placement pathway attached to it. That may well change in the future. I know that's something that the academics, I was chatting to Roman about, that that's not my top tip, that's from Roman. But since I'm chatting to you now, I'll offer it. I know that the academics are looking at that, but currently it doesn't attract placement. But certainly I'm working with a lot of postgrads, as I am with the undergrads, at looking at ways in which they can develop their experiences. I hope that answers the question. Please do.
Thank you. And just a couple of more questions. What kind of support does an international student get? Is it different to home students? Is there any bespoke support for international students? And is Brunel University recognised by the Bar Council of India, if you know or not?
Oof, I don't know. I don't know specifically about. I think. I mean, in terms of, I'm not going to blag that one. Actually, I would say, but generally speaking, if the LLB course is a recognised course and is, I know that there are students. I can't say specifically about India, but I work with an awful lot of international students who go on from Brunel with their qualifying law degree to qualify in their home jurisdiction from here. So I suspect the question is probably yes, but I'm not going to say that I know definitively. So I would probably chat to your home bar council would be the best recommendation there. In terms of what sort of support for international students, for me, I mean, I work with my domestic students, I work with my international students, and I guess there is no difference. I work with a full range of students. So actually, it's always about what is it that you're interested in, what are your experiences, and how can we help you get to the next stage. So that plan I was talking about earlier, is actually what's your plan, and it's very much that's where. So we, Roman and I, we do a lot of workshops and webinars, but actually for me, the real emphasis is on one-to-one appointments. Work with us specifically, because each and every one of you, this is going to sound a bit fluffy, but it's true, I believe it, each and every one of you is unique, and what you want from your careers and the journey that you go through, to get to that point as to what is it you're going to do, what's the next step, it's entirely unique to you. And I shall very much look forward to working with you. I know Roman does too.
Thank you, Bridget. And could you give us just a brief overview of what makes a law application stand out? Is there any specific skills that they should be talking about, they should mention?
Oh, God, Cashin, we haven't worked together before. I could talk on this for hours.
I know.
Okay, so actually, it's all been touched on before. So I was going to think. I think about your almost your legal journey through university as it's almost like a stepping stone. So Joe said it very, very nicely. I think that actually without his placement, he didn't think that he would get his probate role. Without his probate role, he didn't think he would have got his training contract. Actually, knowing Joe, I think he would absolutely smashed it no matter what. Nonetheless, it is about every step of the way. So in your first year, if you're thinking about wanting to get a placement, so Rebecca saying just get involved. If you're not quite sure, just get interested. The tasters of everything. The things that you do in your first year will influence then potentially the kinds of roles that you might get in your second year. That then coming back in terms of after your placement, it will then help you in terms of what happens after you graduate. But how can you stand out? So developing the transferable skills, so understanding what the skills are of the kind of lawyer or graduate that you're looking for. So a law degree is a fabulous thing to do, irrespective of whether you're going down taking the legal pathway. I know we're quite focused on sort of the law related, So think about, solicitors, barristers, they're going to be good communicators, problem solvers, logic leaders, being able to speak publicly, being able to write kind of effectively. So kind of almost, but every different roles require different things. The barristers, it's really quite focused on the advocacy, the public speaking. So that's why I said the mooting, the debating. Actually, but solicitors will do advocacy as well to a certain point. So, actually it's equally valid for you, whether you're a solicitor or a barrister. Things that can really make you stand out. When I was chatting to a couple of trainees or future trainees last year, they said that when they got their VAC scheme, they got vacation schemes, which is a formal period of work experience. You start applying from your second year. They secured now they basically had an area of interest. I was talking about commercial awareness. I think one of them was really interested in sort of technology and sort of financial technology. And so he basically was following that. He was reading up about it. He was talking to people about it. I think he attended a kind of an event, a conference, where he got to chat to people in the industry. So he really brought it to life over and above just reading it on the website. And I think that's something that both Rome and Rebecca, all of our speakers, and Joe and myself, were all saying is actually try and make it real, bring it to life. So getting out and talking to people, I was going to think as well, if you go to a networking event, and that's why we do put a lot of these events on, you get to chat to somebody who's doing it. So Joe, in terms of employment, it was something we were chatting about earlier in the year, in terms of the Home Office, kind of thinking about immigration, thinking about judicial review. When you get the chance to speak to people, what do you do? Why do you like it? What are you interested about it? That kind of thing. You can then use that as a platform to talk to people at interview or talk about on your application forms. One of the events that we ran in Law Week, actually one of the placements Roman might have mentioned, GE Aviation. So they're GE is a huge global company. Sorry, I realise this is a question. I've gone off on one, haven't I? I promise you I'll finish after this one. But there was a student, we ran a workshop, the legal team, legal and contracts team from GE Aviation ran a workshop for us during Law Week. And a student who was in the first year who attended that workshop the next year applied to them for a placement in their legal and contracts team, got the placement, and then I think has now come back into a final year. Things that kind of thing is just from, oh, that was really interesting. As a result of that interest, I've applied for it. It gives you something to talk about at the interview. And I see a lot of students who've attended events writing those on their applications and talking about them at interview. And it's a really good way to make yourself stand out from the crowd. So that was a very long answer to a very short question. I apologise. I hope that was helpful, though.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. That was very, very helpful and very, very beneficial. I've learned a lot as well from about it.
Sorry, it's like the shepherd's crook's going to shut me up in a second.
Very good. We're going to go over to Roman now. So Roman, if you just want to turn your camera on and unmute yourself.
Yeah.
Just a quick question. Can I do a placement overseas? And are all placements paid? And if so, what's the range?
Not all placements are paid. So in the law industry, unfortunately, I'll say there's a 70-30 split. 70% of our placements every year are usually paid and 30% of them are unpaid. All of our placements, if they're unpaid, there will be expenses. So they will cover your expenses and stuff like that. So those kind of placements would advise for students that probably live around that area and stuff like that, or living from home, to apply for. But like I said, there are a lot of placements that are paid. The range goes from, the industry average is 15 grand, but the lowest in terms of a paid placement can be 10.5 grand. And we have got placements that pay up to 25 grand. So there's a massive range in between all of that, but the industry average is about 15 grand a year. Can you do your placements outside of the UK? Yes, definitely you can do. We, as a department, my focus will be finding placements within the UK because that's obviously my remit. But we do have obviously a lot of international students that have got placements back in their home countries and countries that they're living in. So in the past, we've had students in Dubai. I know we've had students in America, India, China, and stuff like that. So yes, you can do your placement anywhere in the world. The only criteria for the placements team is to ensure the country you're going to is going to be safe. So we look at FCO, the Foreign Commonwealth, to see, as long as our government said there's nothing wrong with that country, there's no risk of your safety in that country, we'll be happy to approve that placement. And secondly, the placement that you do has to be a legal placement. So as long as you're working in a legal department in another country, in a safe country, then yeah, it will be fine.
Thank you very much for that, Roman. We're going to go over to Rebecca now. So Rebecca, if you just want to unmute yourself and turn your camera on. I know you touched on this a little while ago, but just two quick questions. What did you love, or what do you love most about studying law at Brunel? And is there anything that you wish you knew before you started your law degree?
Oh, that's a difficult question to pinpoint something exactly. I think one thing I would say is, compared to school and college, I think it's a lot more easier to stay constantly interested in your studies, because it's actually something you have a genuine interest in, and it's something that will apply to your future career. So I think that's definitely something that I love about studying law, is I always have an interest in it. And sorry, what was the other question?
Is there anything that you wish you knew before you started your law degree?
Oh, that's a very tricky question. No, I don't think so. I think a lot of with law as a degree, and then going on to do a placement, you sort of learn everything as you go. So there's not that need to sort of have done loads of preparation beforehand, because you learn everything as you go. So I don't think there is anything I wish I could have done before.
What about the social aspect? Obviously, you came to a university that was kind of unknown to you. How was it like making friends within the law field and making friends outside the law field?
Right.
So
in terms of the social aspect, I would definitely say in your first few weeks, it's important to just go to everything. If you want that sort of social life, go to everything, sign up to as many societies as you can, especially if you're not going to be living on campus. I'd say if you're not living on campus, try and sign up to all the societies that you've got an interest in. Any event that you sort of see, even if you don't know anyone, just go, because chances are you'll meet someone and make a friend while you're there. So that would be my advice if you're not living on campus. And if you are, I think it's quite easy. You'll most likely make friends with people in your halls. You'll be seeing people in your course, probably end up walking to and from your lectures with your friends that you make. I know I did that, especially in my first year. So yeah, I think that would be my advice in terms of the social aspect.
Perfect. Thank you very much for that, Rebecca. That was very, very beneficial. And we're going to go over to Joe now, who provided us a recording, and he's going to do a massive reveal, I think, internet connection permitting on his end. I'm so jealous of Joe. He's on holiday right now.
I'll give it a go.
Perfect. Thank you. We can hear you and we can see you. Perfect. Well done. That was a great video, by the way. Thank you very much for that. I want to ask you a couple of quick questions before we finish up. What transferable skills are taught on the course? I know you touched on it a little bit, that will make you kind of job ready to go into a law firm. And what facilities does Brunel University have specifically for law students?
I think it was sort of touched upon by Rebecca in one way, and that was just the very basic in terms of getting into a routine, getting used to getting up at a set time to go to work. And, you know, a lot of people in my year when we did placements, that was their first job. So just generally learning how to behave in an office, thinking pragmatically about things like that. I think, you know, as well as all of the legal experience that you gain on top of it as well, there's certainly a benefit that comes with that. And again, you know, you get used to applying for jobs, be that for a placement, be that for a training contract, be that for in a completely different field. You know, practice makes perfect, and that's certainly something that I found, that, you know, doing these applications for the placement scheme, whilst quite different to training contract applications, they put me in good stead, and I knew what the calibre of the application needed to reach, what was expected of me in terms of the level of detail balanced against succinctness. So, you know, you're going to get a lot of experience and you're going to be able to talk about that, but there's a wider array of things that come with that as well. So it's certainly what I would say in terms of the placement. What was the second question, sorry?
What kind of facilities does Brunel University have to support law students? Or is there any facilities particularly you use to support yourself?
I was going to say, so this has changed. This may have changed since I graduated, which is now 5 years ago, which makes me feel quite old. But when I was there, as Bridget mentioned, I got to know Bridget very, very well. The biggest thing about the Professional Development Centre is that for students, it's free. So use it. You don't want Bridget to be lonely. I'm sure she never would be because she's very busy anyway. But it's a brilliant service that's provided by the university and a real bonus. And be it whether it's, honing applications, getting you interview ready, building your confidence, or just making you aware of what's out there, as Rebecca said. It's a really, really good service, so I'd use that. I think it's quite distinct for universities. I certainly haven't come across any others that provide such an in-depth and supportive service. All of the extracurricular activities that have been mentioned, mooting, debating, etc., I know they're offered by quite a lot of unis. So again, whilst that's not necessarily distinct to Brunel, it's certainly something I'd recommend getting involved in. I used to hate public speaking, and whilst I'm doing it remotely, here I am doing it now. So it's certainly helped me as well.
Thank you very much for that. That was very beneficial for our students listening in. We are going to end it here now. We're going to close, but just before we kind of finish up and before my colleague kind of hits end on the meeting session, there is a session next week on study skills. So it is available on our website now to book. So please do go ahead and book. It's going to cover stuff like essay writing and kind of support areas, which is really good. The students listening in now, you are going to be getting a feedback survey sent to you via email sometime tomorrow morning. Please fill it out. It helps us a lot. It helps us to know what kind of we're doing right and kind of areas we may be able to improve on. Also, there's a chance to win a £50 Amazon voucher. So that's an incentive in itself. This session, just as a reminder, it is recorded. So you'll be able to watch it back from our website. If you do have any more questions, or if you feel like there's been some questions that have been sent in that we haven't answered it, please do email them into open.bookings@brunel.az.uk. So if you look on the chat now, you should be able to see that information. Just finally, thank you very much for listening, and I hope it was beneficial for everyone.